You know, the story of the Titanic, it's more than just a famous movie or a historical tragedy. It's a legend. But when you look past that legend, you find this incredible story of science, of some serious overconfidence, and well, of lessons learned in the absolute harshest way imaginable. So let's dive in and really separate the myth from the reality.
To really get the Titanic, you have to picture the world that built it. We're talking about the early 20th century, a time of just incredible technological pride. People really felt like we were finally getting a handle on the natural world. Oceans weren't obstacles anymore. They were just big roads. And that mindset, that total, unshakable confidence in human engineering, that's the key to this whole story.
So, yeah, the Titanic wasn't just another ship. It was a statement. It was this massive, floating monument to this new age of human ambition.
I mean, think about that for a second. The largest moving man-made object of its time. This thing wasn't built just to get people from point A to point B. Oh no, it was designed to dominate, to blow people's minds, and to prove that human ingenuity had hit a whole new level. So when you hear people call it unsinkable, that wasn't just some clever marketing slogan. It was a deeply held belief, totally baked into the pride of that era.
And the numbers here, they just show you the insane scale of that ambition. We're talking about a ship almost 900 feet long. It was put together with 3,000 steel plates, each an inch thick. And what held it all together? 3 million rivets. Now, you're going to want to remember that number, 3 million, because those tiny pieces of metal, well, they become a huge part of our story later on.
So, you've got this masterpiece of engineering just slicing through the Atlantic. What could possibly go wrong, right? Well, turns out the ship's biggest weakness wasn't in its steel, but in its operation. The ocean was practically screaming warnings, but it seems like no one was really listening.
And the warnings just kept piling up. This wasn't some bolt from the blue. All day long on its final day, the Titanic was getting hit with wireless messages about ice. Warnings came in the morning, then more in the afternoon, and even more in the evening from a bunch of other ships. The danger wasn't a mystery. It was right there, well documented, and sent over and over again. And this is where the story gets almost unbelievably ironic. One of the most important warnings from that German steamer, the America, it was actually picked up by the Titanic's own radio room and then relayed to the shore. Just like the U.S. hydrographer said later, the very message that could have saved the ship passed right through its own systems, but it never made it to the people on the bridge who needed to see it.
So the big question is why? I mean, with all these warnings, why did they just keep plowing ahead? The answer really is speed. They were going 22 knots, which is nearly full steam, right into an area they knew was full of icebergs. That belief in the unsinkable ship was just so powerful that it created this fatal sense of calm. Confidence simply steamrolled caution.
Now, for decades, the story of how the ship sank was really just based on what the survivors remembered. But then, after they found the wreck in 1985, forensic science could finally step in and tell us what really happened, right down to the molecules of the metal.
You've probably seen it in the movies, right? This giant 300-foot gash getting ripped in the side of the ship. That was the myth for a long, long time. But when they used sonar to map the wreck, it told a totally different story. The damage wasn't one giant hole. Nope. It was a series of 6 smaller openings where the steel plate seemed to have just popped apart. And that little detail is everything when it comes to understanding why it all went so wrong.
And this is where the science gets super fascinating. When they analyzed pieces of the hole they brought up, they found that the steel plates themselves, they were pretty strong, but they became brittle in that freezing cold Atlantic water. The real weak link, though? The 3 million rivets we talked about earlier. Metallurgists found that a lot of them had impurities, this stuff called slag, which basically made them weak. So when the iceberg hit, these weak rivets probably just popped open like buttons on a shirt, letting the whole plate separate. And that let water pour into not 1, not 2, but 6 of the ship's watertight compartments. The problem was, the quote-unquote unsinkable ship was only designed to stay afloat if 4 of them flooded, not 6.
But you see, the sinking wasn't just about bad rivets or brittle steel. It was a total catastrophic failure of planning, of regulations, and of basic humanity.
Over 1,500 people lost their lives that night. It's just a staggering number, and it's a number that could have and absolutely should have been so much lower.
This right here is probably the most shocking truth of the entire disaster. The fact that there weren't enough lifeboats. That wasn't an accident or an oversight. It was intentional. The regulations back then were just completely out of date, and the ship's designers were working under the crazy assumption that a full-scale evacuation would just never be necessary. The lifeboats were seen more like ferries, to get people to a nearby rescue ship, not as a way to save everyone on board.
And to make a horrible situation even worse, the social class system on land was brutally enforced at sea. Priority for the lifeboats went to first and second-class passengers, which led to a lot of boats launching half full. Meanwhile, the people in third class, they were stuck dealing with locked gates and a confusing maze of corridors. Their chances of survival were way, way lower, and it was a direct result of where their ticket was on the ship.
The sheer horror of what happened sent this shockwave around the entire world. It was a brutal, brutal lesson,